it's Mo. Today I want to do the in and out tag. This tag was originally created by one of my favorite booktubers, Rick MacDonnell, who is no longer making booktube videos, but he is still on Instagram, so if you want to see his kind of wry but silly humor, I would go check him out on Instagram. I will leave his Instagram link down below. He created this tag a little over a year ago, but recently it kind of has come back to booktube and been circling around. The in and out tag is whether you are in on different bookish things or you are out on different bookish things. In Rick's original tag, I remember him saying that if you wanted to add things to the end of this tag, to definitely feel free and add them. So if I can think of a couple while we're going through the prompts, I will add them on at the end. First off, I would like to tag a few people. I would like to tag Jennifer Loves Books. I don't think that she's done this tag yet. I would like to tag Read by Fred. I don't think he's done this tag yet. And I would like to tag Olivia's Catastrophe because I don't know if she's done this tag yet. These are your fast takes on bookish things that you might like or dislike, so I would love to see those three people's opinions. Prompt number 1, reading the last page first. Out. Now, I did used to do this when I was little, when I was first living in New York and I was going to Barnes & Noble and just buying books. I would sometimes read the last page first to see if I wanted to buy that book. But out. Why would you do that? Why did I do that? I don't know. Prompt number 2, enemies to lovers. In. That's fine. I like enemies to lovers, especially the way modern romance does it because it's so not enemies to lovers. It's like, oh, I kind of dislike you, or I got a vaguely annoyed feeling at you. Now I'm in love. Dream sequences. In. 100%. This makes me think of TV a little bit more than it makes me think of books, but I love the dream sequence in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Amazing. That whole episode, incredible. In books, I can't think of a dream sequence off the top of my head, but in. Love triangles. Out. I'm not into the whole idea of love triangles generally, but I also think that, especially like in YA books, they're just used as such a lazy device that, out. Crack spines. In. I love to crack my spines. I know a lot of people don't like it, but I can't wait until you've read enough of the book that you can just snap that baby back and crack it and make it all comfortable to read. So satisfying. Back to my small town. In. I like small town stories in general. I definitely like the return to small town or the I never got out of a small town but now I'm realizing that that's okay kind of story. Monsters are regular people. In. This question's an interesting one because to me it could be like monsters are regular people the way they are in Pet. Like a regular person is also a pedophilic monster and you think they're regular but they're a monster. But it could also mean that like monsters, like vampires, like Louis from Interview with a Vampire is just a regular person but he drinks blood. But in, either way in. No paragraph breaks. Out. Oh, I have not read Ducks Newbury Port? Is that what it's called? That huge long book that has no paragraph breaks. But either way, I don't like it. I like paragraphs. I like short sentences. I like short chapters. I like all that stuff. I'm not so into that kind of experimental writing. Multi-generational sagas. Out. I do not like multi-generational stories. I don't like multi-generational sagas. I probably don't like sagas at all in general because I don't like long books, and multi-generational sagas often are extremely long. Now, I do like stories where there are multiple generations within the same period of time. That I don't mind. I like stories about families to a certain extent. They're still not my favorite, but definitely the multi-generational saga, not for me. Out. Rereading. In. I love to reread. I would love to be able to reread more, but how do you balance rereading with regular reading? Rereading is in. Artificial intelligence. In. I haven't read too many books about AI per se, but I think it's an interesting concept and I definitely like the idea of inanimate objects or non-personified objects getting personified, getting their own intelligence, getting their own autonomy and personalities, so all the way in. Drop caps. For me, drop caps are in. Drop caps are when the first letter of the first word of all the chapters are different, larger font, different style than the rest of the chapter. That's fine. Happy endings. In. I like a happy ending, sure. I think a happy ending also can be both happy and unhappy. A happy ending can be a true ending or a realistic ending, not necessarily a shiny happy ending. I think I like happy endings. Maybe I like unhappy endings more, but I like happy endings. Plot points that only converge at the end. This is another one that I don't really know. I'm not a big fan of dual timelines, so I don't particularly like it when you have an older timeline and a newer timeline. I just don't like that, so them coming together at the end doesn't make or break my like of that, but I just don't particularly like it. I've definitely read books where, like Hell of a Book is a good example for me from this year, of there being multiple stories happening throughout. There were multiple timelines in that to a certain extent, but multiple stories, and then you kind of don't know how they all come together till the end. Except in that book, you kind of did know how they come together because it was kind of obvious, but sure. Detailed magic systems. Out. I don't want to learn a new word. This is part of the reason that I don't really like fantasy, but like I don't want to have to learn new words for anything, especially if they're things that already exist in our universe and people are already speaking English in the book and whatever. I don't want to learn like a fake new word for a weird fake magic system or tool that you have to use or anything like that. So detailed magic systems definitely out. Magic systems in, but anything that like is super involved, nah. Classic fantasy races in. I love elves and ogres and vampires and all sorts of classic alien / fantasy races. I'm not the biggest fantasy reader, but I think that's in. Unreliable narrators. So, I do love unreliable narrators, 100% in, if they're done well. Now, modern unreliable narrators, just a woman being like depressed so she's unreliable, or having an actual issue like alcoholism or sleepwalking disorder or anything like that, and that making them an unreliable narrator, out. So like most of the modern unreliable narrators, no, I can't stand it. It's such a thinly veiled attack, especially on women, that it really bothers me. But a true unreliable narrator, a narrator that you are not sure if they are understanding reality or if you are understanding reality through their eyes, or they as the narrator talking to you, you can trust, in. Love it. Evil protagonists. This is another one I'm not sure about. Is this an evil protagonist in that the protagonist is bad, but we follow them and they're making good choices, a la Good Omens, like where there's a demon, but he wants to keep the world alive? Or is this evil protagonist in that you're following a evil person? I've never read Brent Easton Ellis's American Psycho, but that is the book that comes to mind. So like someone who's actually evil is the main character that you are following. I would say in either way. Not a hard in, but in. The Chosen One. I'm 50-50 on The Chosen One. I don't want to read any young adult with the Chosen One trope. I don't want to read a book where the Chosen One is a pretty girl who doesn't know she's pretty. I don't want to read even a Buffy the Vampire-like story, really. Although I do like Buffy as the Chosen One. There's some interesting nuance there. I know we're not supposed to love Joss Whedon right now, but his stories were quite good. Not feminist, but quite good. But I recently read Ring Shout, and that has like kind of a Chosen One twist on the Chosen One trope, and I did really enjoy that book. So I would say soft in. When the protagonist dies, I have no problem with the protagonist either being dead, like in Tokyo Ueno Station, or dying midway through, relating their life. Sure, protagonist dies, in. Really long chapters, out. I'll read a really long chapter. I'll read a book with no chapters, especially if there's like if there's, not paragraph breaks. What is it called when it's not a paragraph break, but it's like a blank space, like a few blank lines between one section of the book and another section of the book, either within a chapter or within a book with no chapters. If there's that, I don't mind it at all. If there's not that, I like something to break up the chapters, but do I absolutely need it? No. But really long chapters, I'm still gonna say out. I'd prefer not. French flaps. So French flaps are when a paperback book has a flap like a hardcover dust jacket would have. And I love a French flap. They're not the best as far as like, you can't mark your page with them really because there's not enough give to the heavy durable material of a paperback cover to really fold over, but I think they're cute and I like the idea of having the blurb or the synopsis on the French flap rather than on the back, and it gives you space on the back to do quotes or other things. French flaps definitely in. The next question is deckled edges, 100% out. Why do deckled edges exist other than they're kind of pretty? Because they're so annoying to read from. Like, you can't turn the page, it's super hard, it's hard to like mark where you are. Deckled edges are out. Signed copies by the author. The only books I've ever really had signed were by Kurt Vonnegut. I was super lucky to see him before he died. I have a music autobiography that was signed. I have some comic books that were signed. Probably my best sign is Mike Mignola, who I love, who's an author of comic books, a writer and illustrator. One of my all-time favorite comic book artists forever. Do I go out of my way to get things signed? No, not very often. But if I find a signed copy, is it kind of cool? Yes. So I would say in for signed copies by the author. Dog-eared pages, in 100%. This is the only way that I mark my pages, is by dog-earing them. I always lose a bookmark. I don't particularly like big bookmarks with a tassel or anything like that. I like to look at them, but I don't like to use them. So dog earring, 100% in. And the last question from Rick is chapter titles instead of numbers, and I would say in. I like a chapter title when it alludes to something in the chapter. I like a chapter title when it doesn't, but either way, chapter titles are in. So did I think of any in or out questions? I would say quirky detectives. Are you in or out on quirky detectives? I'm gonna say mostly out. Even though I have read quite a few quirky detectives. Now, I would classify a quirky detective as Poirot and a non-quirky detective as Miss Marple. So there's some nuance there, obviously, but I would rather have a detective that's a little bit more straightforward than one that's overly quirky. So I'm gonna say out on quirky detectives. Only one murder in a mystery book. I recently was reading a book that I thought was only gonna have one murder and then it had two, and I was really surprised. So I think this is a good question for mystery readers. I'm going to say in. I'm fine with only having one murder in a mystery book. A lot of times there's one murder and other crimes, but I certainly don't mind when there's multiple murders in a mystery, especially a cozy mystery book, because why are the bodies piling up? It's so funny. Long-running mystery series as our final mystery in or out add-on question. And I'm gonna say in. I definitely love Miss Marple. I haven't read any of the Poirot books yet, but I'm sure I'll love those. I love Inspector Morse books. That was a pretty long series. I'm currently in the middle of quite a few long series. Miss Marple, the Dorothy Simpson books, Lord Peter Wimsey. Definitely in for long-running mystery series. Those were all the questions for the in and out tag, plus a few extras for Cloak and Dagger Christmas and Christie's Missing Readathon. Let me know in the comments below if you have done this tag. If you have, leave your video down below so that we can watch it. I would love to get more videos linked from mine so my viewers can go to other people's channels. And if you haven't done this tag net yet and it's interesting, feel free to do a video and post it, or feel free to answer the questions in the comments below. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!